Shabbat Shalom. We are finishing up the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. This is the final week with Bechukotai. We bring it to its triumphant conclusion by talking about other ways that you can give things to God. All of Vayikra, really from the beginning to the end, is about giving from ourselves to God. Some of it may seem very idealistic and enlightening, the idea of loving our neighbor as ourselves, the idea of seeking out God in acts of holiness. Some of it may seem a little old-fashioned and mandatory, the giving of daily sacrifices by the community, the bringing of a sacrifice to make atonement for sins, the giving of tithes, the giving of other portions as part of our mandatory spiritual taxation, if you will. But in this final chapter of Bechukotai, we come across what I consider to be one of the least familiar parts of giving in Judaism. Just a second. I could see that the sun was hitting right where you were, and I thought that was probably not very comfortable. By the way, everyone should always feel this is your chapel as well. I know it says Savage on the door, and we are very grateful for their donation to make it so beautiful, but if you need to adjust the chairs, the blinds, whatever, that's okay. Feel free. So this most unusual form of donation, voluntary gift in the amount equal to a person of your choice. It's what's known as the Erech vow. Erech being the word for evaluation. I know, it doesn't sound quite as pretty when you put it into English. So the basics go like this. Somebody says, I would like to make a donation to the tabernacle, or later the temple, and that donation should be worth Mr. Shapiro. All right? Well, the Torah does not tell us to evaluate Mr. Shapiro in particular. The Torah tells us that we're evaluating him as one of a category, basically economic productivity. So men, yes, were considered more productive in the ancient world of digging and plowing, and therefore the male amount for a mature person between 20 and 60 would be more than for a child or for a woman, and then after they go past 60, the value goes down again. I will point out a little tidbit, the woman's value does not decrease as much after 60s as the man's value do. There's a little bit of a hidden message which I'll talk about off camera of what the rabbis say about that particular point. And so once they've decided Mr. Shapiro is a 25-year-old man, therefore you will donate X amount, you donate X amount. Now, it doesn't mean you're donating Mr. Shapiro. Mr. Shapiro stays in his own happy life just as he is. It just means you're going to make a donation equivalent to the value that was placed according to the Torah's valuation on a person that matches Mr. Shapiro's category. You can even make the donation, make the vow for yourself. You can say, I would like to donate me to the tabernacle, to the temple. Again, you're not going to hand yourself over. We don't do human sacrifice or human servitude to the temple as part of our donations. But you would be giving then the value of yourself, which as a sort of means test for donation would make a lot of sense. If you are in the more productive years of your life, then giving more as a way of showing gratitude and appreciation to God would make sense, rather than giving a more trivial amount. It's a way of setting a benchmark of what you may wish to give as a show of gratitude to God and support for the community. Now, where this gets even stranger is that if you can't afford to pay the vow that you just made, well, what are we going to do? So imagine somebody who's not really well off says, I would like to make a vow for myself. And they say, great, you're a 25-year-old man, and therefore your vow is going to be 50 shekels. I can't afford 50 shekels. What do? You've made a vow. You have made a declaration. You have made a consecrated statement that you wish to give an amount. And even though you didn't state the actual number in the amount as you said, you stated the equivalency yourself, and therefore you're on the hook. So how do we handle this?
Say, if I would have known I was worth 50 shekels, I would have made that vow and asked to annul the vow.
All right, so one option that we do for other types of vows that are made stupidly is to annul the vow. There is a means of going to the Beit Din, going to the rabbinic court, and usually it follows the lines exactly as Aaron is saying, which is, if I had realized that the vow I was making was stupid because I don't have the money that it was going to be, and it's printed in the Torah how much it's going to be, so come on, then the vow could be canceled because clearly you made the vow in error, and that a person would not be held accountable for a vow that was made under a mistaken assumption, because that would just be mean, and the Torah is not mean. But not this time, because this time you have made a vow for a dedication, for consecrated objects, and consecrated objects become sacred in and of themselves and cannot be easily walked back. If you dedicate a cow, you don't get out of dedicating that cow by saying, oh, I forgot I need that cow for plowing. Nope, that cow is heading off to the altar. There are means of redeeming a cow, but it involves paying a surcharge on the top of it and then giving a different dedication. Well, if I'm already poor and I can't afford the original vow, putting a surcharge on my dedication to get me out of it is not really going to solve this problem. Instead, the Torah says, the Kohen goes and says, well, what do you got? They essentially go to the person and they assess their possessions. And from that, they will collect. The repo man shows up, who's a Kohen, and decides how much you can afford to pay. And then that will fulfill your vow. Is this a leniency or is this a stringency? Feels like a stringency, that, you know, when the guy shows up at the door and he's got the lead pipe and says, so I hear you've got a debt you need to pay off. What do you got that we can sell in this house of yours? Oh, the house itself. Well, that's a very nice house. Feels a little harsh, doesn't it? If the person is already struggling enough that they can't pay the initial vow to sell their possessions out from under them, seems a little bit mean, and I just said the Torah is not mean. Well, in order to understand that this is not mean, because I would never go back on that claim that the Torah is never mean, we have to understand that when this gets put into practice, like other types of debts as well, there are allowances in this assessment, allowances for a person's needs. That is to say, when the Kohen is assessing what the person can pay, they don't add up every piece of food in the pantry. They don't add up every garment in the wardrobe. They don't add up every tool that is in their work shed. Instead, those things that the person needs to live are off the table. They are not part of the assessment. Life's necessities continue to be your property. Any luxuries you happen to have, yes, those can be assessed. And those can then be sold to pay off the vow that you made. A little bit more lenient in that case, yes, right? The Torah taking into account that a person should never be stripped to their bare bones in order to pay a debt. And by the way, that goes for paying off other types of debts as well, not only a debt to the temple. But you might still, judging by the faces around the room, feel a little uncomfortable with this. It still feels like somebody's coming in and taking my stuff. And so I need to remind you of something at the very beginning of what I said. This is voluntary. The person chose to make this vow. The person chose to make a declaration that they wanted to give to the temple. They wanted to feel that sense of having supported the community and supported what God is trying to do by giving this erech vow, this fullness of a person, this fullness of a self. Should they be prevented from doing that because they're poor? Should they be told, I'm sorry, you're not able to participate in this type of gift to the temple. Go back and save your shekels, and we'll talk to you later when you've got enough to be worth our trouble. No. Instead, the Torah says, look, if the person really wants to do this, we don't let them bankrupt themselves. We don't let them sell everything they own and turn them out naked in the street with no home and no livelihood. We instead put a stop to that. Even if they wanted to, we would not take it. We would not let someone impoverish themselves like that. But we will let them fulfill their vow. We'll meet them halfway. We will appraise what they can pay and what they can't pay. And that way, their vow will be made complete. They will be whole in the fulfillment of their promise to God. And it doesn't matter how much they have or how little they have. There is always a way to have that completeness, that fulfillment of that commitment. And the Torah wanted to make sure that it would be available to everyone, not only to those who would clear the financial bar, but available to even those who might be struggling. It could be that when the Kohen comes and they tally up everything that's in the house that is not a necessity, maybe they're only a couple shekels. That's okay. Those couple shekels are equal to the full completion of a vow for someone else who is better off, because the person has given a fullness of what they wish to give. We should always be sure that we are looking for ways to give from the fullness, recognizing that we are not expected to impoverish or bankrupt ourselves, recognizing that we are not expected to give 100% of all of our time and all of our energy, but recognizing what we can give, what we do have that is spare beyond our necessities. That is always welcome, that is always a blessing, and it is always a chance to feel fulfilled and to feel equal to the most prolific of givers, from the biggest of the philanthropists. Whatever a person gives that is truly from their heart and what they have chosen to give, that is equal in the eyes of God. Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.